would it be fair to say, we talk about defenses, that people have, there's certain aspects of trauma, of darkness, of pain, of rage, of contempt, okay, that sit in people's psyche in particular ways that serve as a massive threat to the normal everyday experience. And so they build ways of avoiding, suppressing, repressing, compartmentalizing, and moving away from that kind of stuff. But the energy in relationship to what that occupies in their psychic structure relative every day is then central to their structure. Okay? And there's no way just to narrate that without charging the mode, okay, without getting through what is blocking and bringing that. But to do that drops them into certain kinds of either regressive modes of like, they don't want to do it, so they're defended against it, so they resent the shit out of you, or then they become so overwhelmed by it and then they decompensate. This process by which individuals can gain access to these core elements and begin the process of feeling them with arousal, but then reintegrating and re-narrate them so that the fundamental relationship of the architecture of the self begins to evolve and change. Is that fair to kind of characterize what you're seeing and the kind of defensive work that you're advocating for?
I agree with everything you said, but I think for some people, if they're not therapists, that may be kind of abstract. It's like, okay. So if I can make it a little more concrete, it's like, and this is what, I feel embarrassed, but it wasn't my fault. I got really great training. I had professors like Mahoney, and then I had also just a lot of crap supervisors. And, I was told, just follow the feeling, magnify the, get the client more in touch with the feelings. But many, if not most, feelings are actually defenses against the true feeling.
Secondary feeling. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, the wife comes in and, her husband slapped her, and you say, how do you feel? And you say, well, I feel betrayed. And, no, he betrayed you. You don't feel, we use these terms all the time. Parents say to their children, I'm very disappointed in you. No, the child disappointed you. And the truth is, you're angry at the child, or you're angry at the husband for slapping you. And you can ask them that question 20 times, and they'll give you 20 different responses, none of which are anger. And I know a lot of people, I've had so many students, react to say, who are you, to say what they should be feeling. But the truth is, these basic emotions, that Ekman has researched and whatnot, they're very universal. Different cultures have rules on what's socially acceptable and how to express them. But loss is the reaction. Sadness is the reaction to loss. Anger is the reaction to some kind of violation or injustice, right? Fear is a response to immediate danger. These kind, if a wild tiger is approaching you and you don't feel fear, there's something wrong with you, and that fear, all these adaptive emotions, in contrast to a defensive emotion, they motivate adaptive action tendencies. Run from the tiger, or with anger, protect yourself, draw boundaries, make you right the wrong or whatever. Sadness, grieve, consolidate the loss. And, but, people are, and, what's so fascinating, the convergence, I think consilience around, like when you look at Rogers and his development of an incongruent self, it's this classic defenses. People have, if you express anger and your parents withdraw love, you learn that it's, even though
filter that shit,
the organism naturally experiences anger, and the anger actually feels good initially, but compared to having love withdrawn, you start to deny that you have the experience of anger. And again, people who aren't psychologists or therapists may not really appreciate that people no longer have the experience of anger, even though they clearly are angry, And I'll never forget this one client I had who had a history. I was a doctoral student and a very violent past, had been incarcerated numerous times. And I can't remember what question I asked him, but he was sitting in his chair, white knuckled. I'm not angry. And it's like, he wasn't lying to me. He was basically alexithymic, unable to label feelings. And it's like, yeah, you are. I didn't say that, but it's like, there are lots of times when you can, even lay people can know more accurately what some people are feeling than the person themselves, because they're truly defended. And when you go, if you're a young child and expressing anger gets you beaten up by your dad, it's very adaptive to deny anger, right? It's the most adaptive thing you could possibly do. maybe a child who's being raped in incest, they dissociate. That's not happening. That's not me. That dissociation is the healthiest way of coping in that moment. The problem, as you know, these defenses become completely habitual, automatic, and chronic. And they don't only, what really cripples people, and that's a word that may not sound PC, but one of the great, I hope I don't get off this tangent, but let me come back to the word cripple, if you can remind me.
Okay. Yep.
What really cripples people is not, I mean, I think is that the defenses don't just have the intrapsychic effect of not knowing your emotions, they create a barrier to intimacy with people.
Right.
So you cannot really have true emotional closeness. And then in my theory, that's something that humans need. And that's something that has always bothered me about Beck, is that he didn't basically have that as a real human need.
Yep.
And so the defenses really cripple people. And now, again, if you're working with people who are in poverty and experiencing all kinds of discrimination, then, defense work and emotion work may not be the most important thing. But for the clients I've been seeing the last 7 or 8 years, that seems to be the bulk of what I'm doing to really deal with. They all have complex trauma in their history and difficulty trusting people. But I will say, so here's an example. Davin Liu talked about the key thing was a breakthrough to the unconscious, which is extremely dramatic portrayals of rage, where they act out murdering parents and things like that. And then intense grief and guilt comes. And I have done those I video all my sessions to this day and receive supervision, but that process is very tricky. And I've had what my therapist said were pseudo unlockings, and a client went home and acted out. It didn't hurt anybody, but damaged property. So I kind of veered away from doing that part of ISDP. And without doing the thing that he says is the key, I have clients who have had such significant characterological change that he said could only happen with unlockings. Right. But it's an example of learn to take from different approaches what what's valuable and what's not. And again, I recommend everybody to learn about Davin Liu, but I think the best places to learn about it are from Fredrickson and Novice, not Davin Liu himself. I'm still, I've just gotten really excited. It's been a nice thing. For a while there, I was kind of like, I don't know, not completely passionate about some psychotherapy stuff. And I'm always been interested in the unified stuff, and talking to you always jacks me up, but in the best way possible. And but no, huge fan of the experiential dynamic therapies. But I'm not sure if I really answered your question about defenses.
No, totally. But I was going to have you come back to cripple.
Yeah. So that word. People, well, first of all, it sounds like a very bad way of describing somebody with a disability. But one of the things that Davin Liu would do, and I really admire this, is he filmed all of his sessions. And when people would have, tremendous recoveries or healing or whatever, he would show them sessions from their first or second session. And the most common word that the patients themselves used to describe themselves was, "I can't believe how crippled I was." And so he says that word really kind of resonates in the unconscious. Yeah. And so I'll things that I'll say to clients are, it's so obvious how much they're suffering. And, they come out here, they self-pay, they drive, an hour each way. And yet then they don't want to really face the core stuff. They're talking, I'll point out, are you aware that you're not talking about your core struggles? And I said, so do you want to continue avoiding this? Or do you want to stay crippled for the rest of your life? Go to your grave, crippled? Or do you want to, try to get to the root of your problems? And that word seems to really, rather than sounding critical, they feel understood.
No, that makes sense to me. I think that right. Obviously it carries the connotations, triggers various things. And there's some place for that and there's some place for it. We can't be tiptoeing around stuff. I mean, it's much of the whole point is people sort of overreact to shit and then they create defensive about shit and then we're now paralyzed, right? To me, certainly, I think of the flow between the body, fundamentally in the body into the heart, which really is this influence matrix, this attachment structure with all the powerful social emotions. It's the felt sense of this dream of being known and valued and what it would be by powerful is to feel that soul fulfillment. And then so many individuals then who feel the opposite, feel the abandonment and the rejection, and then all of the either contempt of self, contempt of other in relationship to that entangled mass. And it is that abyss that is so terrifying, and the inability to know what to do with that in relation, and what therapy affords people that have had these kinds of injuries and then have built the defenses to compartmentalize it, but then sit in essentially a disintegrated way, vertically. They're like their heads out here and they're just doing instrumentally, and our culture feeds that's okay. And, what's the real point? But they're basically walking soulless around. I mean, the system itself is not like charged and ready to say, hey, this is what I care about, because what it's cared about is just jammed into the back. And then that is seen, the heart then is seen as this, scary as shit or cancerous, nasty kind of thing. But the interaction of this cancer and the fear of it leaves you crippled. I mean, the psychic energy is clearly not operating in the sort of the ways of the mechanisms, use a more psychodynamic term, the mechanisms that afford smoothness and flow and integration and then intimate connection, so that I can see you as a brother and be connected. If I can't see myself, how the fuck can I bring you in and be connected? And so this release, this connection, this re-narrating, then if you can then expand that in and heal some of those wounds, you change the fundamental foundational structure of the self. So I mean, that's definitely beautiful stuff.
Yeah. And, again, this was true prior to social media, but, this whole thing about people, I've got, 400 Facebook friends and you have no intimacy. No one really knows you. Right. And I'm just so struck by people who are either, clients who actually, don't have any kind of life partner, or they're married with kids, but they, have no closeness. They really go through life feeling alone with people around them,
Right.
And, so, it's tremendously rewarding to be able to help people, overcome that. But it is very difficult work. It's not the 4, 6, 8 session stuff,
No, well, it's got to be, you got to create the safety. You got to start to create the process of awareness. People keep it at a particular thing. You also have to find, it's not like some magic switch. The system has got to come aligned at the right level so they trust you and you have a way of what I call directive empathy. You empathize with them, you shine the light in a particular way. The world's got to intersect in random ways. And then all of a sudden, then it opens it up if you're fortunate. And again, it's not like some, Hollywood makes it all dramatic, but for me, at least, you get people spectralizing different aspects of it, getting in contact with it, then they come back to it, then it run away. But slowly but surely, there's a developmental process of relating to that which could not be related to in the past. And that's, I've seen that transformation happen. I've felt it in myself in various times historically. And it's absolutely crucial to, I think it's a central feature of what defines psychotherapy, especially any kind of depth-based psychotherapy.
Yeah.